Welcome to the Octopus Movement podcast, where we celebrate the unique minds and extraordinary potential of nonlinear thinkers. Today, per usual, we'll be exploring how the power of nonlinear thinking can transform the world. And I'm Janice, your host, which, thanks to our guest today, I now know stands for joyously anticipating new, interesting, creative encounters. Many thanks. And welcome to the amazing Anthony Hall, HISP, which I'll ask about later, aka Grandpa STORK, founder of The Stork, space tourism operation REAL KIDZS, REAL the Games, reciprocal expressions, acronyms, algorithms, and linguistics, TREO, the Rose of Education organization, and training coordinator at HISP, Holistic Information Security Practitioner Institute, who is a self-described crazy old dragon-flying octopus. Wow. Where to start? How about, shall I call you Anthony or Grandpa?
Just call me Grandpa. Everybody calls me Grandpa, and so I bet whatever you're comfortable with, but it's great to be here, Janice. Thank you for having me on this show. I look forward to talking with you.
And I understand that a lot of your current projects, the Stork, the Real Games, the TREO, they all are inspired by you being a grandpa, yes?
Yes, exactly. How to be a active participant in my grandkids' education and share what I've learned in these 64, almost 65 years of life, and just taking all that and hopefully be of service to them and be an inspiration.
Well, and it sounds like you're being of service not just to them, that you're having an impact on a lot of people, both children and adults. Which came first of your three projects, the Stork, the Real Games, or the TREO?
Okay, so the Stork is part of the whole story. So the Stork is basically Grandpa's brand, but also helps to describe what the Rose of Education organization, which first began as a LinkedIn open group back in 2010. Well, actually, it first began as an email list as I began thinking about what I wanted to do with my life and how I can really execute on this vision of being an active participant, but also doing more than that, but actually developing educational games. And so I founded the Rose of Education organization as a vehicle for that. And so the Stork is an outgrowth of that, out of the games that we've been developing, literacy as well as in physical games, really, how to tap into all those aspects of how we learn and using play as a part of that. So the Stork, again, that's part of the naming convention, is a way of introducing what Grandpa is all about, what the organization is all about, using acronyms as a descriptor to say, okay, Stork was Stork. And so there's a few different meanings for Storks, but again, it's a kind of a play and creative way of communicating.
Well, and I can't remember where it was I was looking, whether it was your website or around LinkedIn, but you're doing this around the world with kids around the world, yes?
Yeah, part of that was, my background is in IT. I've worked in hardware and software development, and seeing how that whole process and learning that process of application development. And so when I started thinking about what I can do, what I can take what I've learned and possibly create an application, when in the Silicon Valley area, you're basically kind of in isolation. You have these theories and concepts, but that's only in this kind of controlled environment.
Right.
The idea then was, well, how would these concepts of play-based learning concepts and games work in the slums of Nairobi or in New Delhi or in the mountains of Nepal, in those villages and in areas where we don't have where communities don't have the type of infrastructure that will support, showing something on an iPad or a smart board or anything like that. But how could I then deliver these ideas and concepts manually in these places? Will they still hold water? And so, going back again to my IT background and creating prototypes, is like, basically understand is the thought is, how would I explain it to my grandma or to my 6-year-old? So the idea of a literacy game that is meant to help build creativity and critical thinking, but also teach kids how to code with the letters of their name and start teaching those concepts. Or like with the dragon flying game, about teaching what's the science, technology, engineering, art, and math of standing on the back of a dragon, or Harry Potter's a broom, and simulating that in an application or in a VR game. And you can have all these highfalutin concepts and ideas, but when you go to some of these places, how would you demonstrate it? How can they get it just like that? And that's what, after 3 years of learning and conceptualizing and testing with my mates, who are colleagues, and playing like with you, with Janice, using your name, those are who I first started playing with. But then the idea was like, okay, well, not just my grandchildren. What about all kids? So it was all about all kids. And then from a strategic point of view and application development, was like, well, let's take it to the crowd. Let's see how these individuals in these areas interact and engage. Can again, the idea of delivering it in a manner that can be accessible, lowering the barrier of entry. And when we talk about inclusion and all those things, it has to be that. We have to think first in those ways, and making sure that we can, what we're communicating is accessible, but also can relate to different individuals' experiences. So that led to me taking the show on the road. Okay, so let's see if we can test this in the wilds of on the African continent or in India, so Cambodia, and Vietnam, and all these places to test and play the game. So it's basically like we're playing games. Everybody likes to play games, and that was the start of that back in February 1st, 2014. I landed in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania for 2 weeks as a test run. Okay, just a 2-week tour. It's like Gilligan's Island. A 2-week tour. That 2 weeks was phenomenal, and it's turned into Grandpa celebrated 10 years on the road. February 1st, 2024, and we're continuing.
That's great. What I love about this is that with so much of humanity's focus at the moment of taking what humans do and putting them into computers, putting things, what can machines and programming and everything do for us, and just everything's focused in that direction, from human to machine. And what you're doing is taking the way to learn the machine is to go from machine to human, to go back to how these kids play, how any human learns by play. And there's been studies since, as far as I know, the early 90s about how play is the surest way to get people to learn and remember things. Laughter and partnership is how we keep it. It's the stuff we keep. And so I love that.
Well, absolutely. I mean, again, that's, play is how animals learn, and really, when you think about education, as far as my view of education and what it should actually, foster and be, and promote, is really it's empowering the student to learn how to learn, and then to motivate them to continue to do so. That's what education is about. Instead of trying to put ones in a box, but it's really we are master learners. That's what we are. So getting back to that, and Grandpa Stork's House of Flying Dragons, which has come out of that as a again the idea of, okay, you have these games, and then going to all these different places. What's the vehicle for that? What's the how do I deliver these games in a format that it can be anywhere? So the idea of the House of Flying Dragons, play-based learning and venture studio, innovation lab, using this as, we can pop up anywhere. Popped up in under trees in Germany, just in all these different places and schools, and at the One Love reggae concert in London, just brought the idea of the games and had people just engage. And it's really been amazing to see that, not only just young kids, but also that tapping into the child we are inside, and that curiosity and creativity and wonder, that we don't have to lose that. And so ultimately, when I think, we talk about creating these games, I really created them for me. It was really for that 9-year-old kid that I was growing up, who was sitting in the class, who couldn't be arsed looking, being taught, being told by the, being taught physics or sociology or science. I'm outside in my brain, in my heart. And so how do we use that? How do we leverage, that there's different ways to learn, and how do we kind of really bring those all into using games as a way to kind of tap into multiple areas of our sensory and of our learning, our kinesthetic learning, learning through art, learning through language, and movement, and all these things. And so traveling was and developing the games as a way to, okay, you got all these different type of kids, and here's all these different ways now that they can engage and start expressing their identity.
Well, and they see their peers doing it, and they see the individual reaction of their peers too. So you're also creating community as you do this, and that there are people that are coming together to do this thing. That suddenly there's play, and there's story, and there's interaction, and so you're also dropping these little community gems in as you go along on your path too. You're like the Johnny Appleseed of curiosity. I love that. What's that? You're already a stork and a dragon and an octopus. Let's just toss Johnny Appleseed in there too. And I think it's really important. And I think it's important. I mean, I don't know that anybody will argue that, children should not be curious, but we forget that we are just giant kids. I mean, you say you're 9. I usually say I'm 8. So, it's about that age where you're still super, super curious, and you're starting to put some things together in interesting ways. And anybody who's seen me host this podcast has heard me say that, I've never met a linear 2-year-old in my life. They can get super concrete about what they're talking about, but they're not linear. And I think it's the natural human state. And then we forget, and boxes can be useful occasionally, but it's so much more fun to poke your head up out of one and crawl around and see what's out there in the wider world. So how did you end up in your wanderings becoming an octopus?
Well, I think I've always been an octopus.
Oh, okay, becoming an Octopus Movement member. Sorry, I misspoke.
Okay. Oh well, the name for one thing, that really resonated, and the concept of how we talk about putting ourselves in boxes, and these boxes made and defined by society or our parents or religion or what have you. that's always been kind of, antithetical, opposite of who I've always viewed myself as,
Mhm.
and having so many different interests in that, like an octopus, it's like, yeah, okay, all right, okay, you have 8 arms, you have 9 hearts, 3 brains, you get, it's like, or is it 3 brains and 9 hearts? I always forget, but
Yeah, I can't
but it
remember.
also,
Yeah.
but it really represents, the really that uh, this whole spectrum,
Mhm.
kind of starts defining the spectrum of our identities, and how that we're not just one thing.
Right.
And so as I started, investigating what the octopus movement was about, it was just kind of, for me, it's kind of a no-brainer. Oh, these are my kind of folks, like
Yeah.
I think I said before, like being on the island of misfit toys. It's like, okay,
Yes.
yeah, these are my folks. And I've been, but when I think about it, my background, I mean, I've been around those kind of people all of my life,
Mhm.
artists and builders and entrepreneurs, and seven at when my mother was 7 months pregnant with me, she recorded a 45, so
Oh,
going
yes.
into that and watching. But she was also an artist. She was also a painter, and worked in all these different, and just explored all her varied interests in art, whether it
Mhm.
been oil, whether it been chalk, whether it been lithograph, and just doing all the. So I grew up watching that. But then some of my first jobs were working in the construction and building trades, and here I'm learning, how to view, you know, what may be a box, and as far as the landscaping, or the area that the house or the deck or the fence is being built, but how you can view that framework doesn't constrain the
Mhm.
architect or the builder from the artistry and creativity that can be created from that box, and how it
Right.
can be shaped, and how you can be able to see then, even those spaces between the lines, or between the thoughts, or between that those frameworks that. And so it was growing up in those kind of environments, and then pretty much everybody knew were entrepreneurs, were self-made. They own their own successful businesses, especially in the construction and building trades, or as artists, or just doing their um, being a service, doing their own
Mhm.
thing. And so uh, that's how I've always kind of viewed things, and to hear more of the conversation about how we need to you know get away from this kind of linear view of how we go about not only solving problems, but also how we go about viewing ourselves. That we don't give ourselves enough credit, or enough. We don't honor the different spectrums of ourselves. We're told to just focus on one thing, but I got 8, 9 things that I'm focused on that I like.
Right.
But
Right.
but then also part of that became, for me, was understanding that all those different things that I'm interested, I've been able to coalesce and condense into the roles of education organization,
Mhm.
a space tourism. So like and this is where I think you know the creativity and play, and that I wanted that to embody that in the organization. When you first get in touch with it, you say, see TREO, you see the stork, you see the dragon's egg. You'll say, what's a stork? Okay, so giving so I have to stop saying so many times, and that's one of the things I'm working on. Anyway, okay, all these word whiskers, but this
Yes.
is great practice, so I appreciate this. The stork, to give you one, the first definition of the stork was stance, theory, optimized, reflex, kinetics. Really reflex chain kinetics. Really, when I first started this idea of going forward and creating these games, my first my, I first wanted to build a flying surfboard. That's really what this was all about.
I saw that. I was going to ask about that, but I didn't know how to segue into it. So I want to hear about the flying surfboard.
So that was my, building a flying surfboard. It's like, okay, what would that be like, and that was just, but it was a fun way to think about. Okay, I thought about that as a fun way to help. How could help introduce science and technology and IT to my grandkids? Yeah, I know what we can do together. We can, Grandpa's going to build a flying machine, build his flying surfboard, and it wasn't so much about the technology. It turns out the technology is the easy part.
Yeah, okay.
How do you simulate that? And so going back to mine, so how would you simulate that? How would you demonstrate that? How would you prototype that? And so that process then really gave me an opportunity to say, okay, we'll use that as the objective. Okay, so how do you simulate that? And then because what would it be actually like to stand on the back of a dragon or to surf dynamically on the Silver Surfer surfboard? And what would be the physical and mental rigors of bird or dragon flight on the human body, and how would we mitigate those things? And so the stork really was the idea that, okay, really what's it all about? It's about balance. It's about standing. So what does it mean to stand, whether it be on the ground, on water, or on air? And so that was really kind of how I approached it. Okay, so it's about balance and studying that. And so that was, but as I began to enlarge on what is really the total vision of the roads of education as a space tourism industry pioneer whose goal is to develop the games and sports that humanity will play in space. And so it's using that idea of everybody's talking about work. Everybody's talking about space, building the space, building the space colonies, I don't know, and space mining and all that. So I'm like, what kind of games we're going to be playing in zero and low gravity, and that was then really part of how to encourage and inspire like kids like my grandkids or children in Africa or these other countries to make sure that as humanity embarks on this next grand voyage among the stars, that these kids, these young folks aren't a captive audience, that they can become captains of industry and enterprises and be inspired to aspire to become these kind of leaders and innovators, and that it's not, they can become stakeholders, but that's something we have to do now. And so that's really been part of the travels, to use these games as a way to kind of, identify, nurture, and cultivate these young space cadets like Grandpa, these dreamers that they can dream beyond the mountaintop, and they can have become stakeholders in this new space economy.
Well, and it's not just that you're inspiring that in them, because kids are ripe for that kind of imagination, but you're showing them that, a guy in his 60s is doing the same thing too, that they don't have to give it up. And I think that's actually a really good gift that you bring to them, is that, oh, wait a minute, this being a grown-up thing doesn't have to be all, I go to work now and I don't have any fun, And I think that's a fabulous gift to children specifically, but also to remind grown-ups that, life is just life can be a whole lot more curious and fun than what we get in the habit of doing. And
well, I mean, we have a choice to either view the world as a prison or as a playground. Exactly. One view is limiting, but the other one is limitless, and it offers up opportunities and for me, like to view my 9 or maybe I say 13-year-old self, because actually TREO turned 13 last year, November 24th, and so to view, and it's really about viewing, that my young self, and but also how I'm now informed as 64 years old by that curiosity, and then that can also informs how I present myself to the world, but how I want to, as far as the innovation, the openness, and the really for me being a grandpa has turned out to be my superpower because it's allowed me to embrace everyone. I can be everyone's grandpa. I can be affable and direct, and but in a way that your grandparents, you can talk to your grandpa. You can talk to them about something serious, and they'll tell you straight, but with a sense of humor and love, and like my grandma used to do with us growing up. And so, the idea of becoming that is for me really um, kind of closes the loop in a sense. Not only that I'm still that young person advising myself, that young grandparent to my grandson or granddaughters, but also that hopefully I can that's the impression that I can leave, that I want a legacy of curiosity and creativity, and that just we live life every day with sometimes without recognizing the beauty and blessings that we have in each day, and being of service is one part of that. So
well, and I think also too the other thing that comes to mind is, I mean, I grew up in a household where everybody, by the time I started kindergarten, everybody else in the house was between 50 and 80 years old, and because my siblings were much older than me, and I've always sort of been fascinated by what kind of elder do I want to be. I spend some time with some of my patients talking about how you when you're a little kid, you know what kind of teenager you want to be, and when you're a teenager, you know what kind of young, and at some point it stops. Like you'd stop throwing that picking the pebble up and throwing it further down the road, right? And deciding what kind of elder you want to be, deciding what part of your wisdom and life experience you want to share is a huge gift to people and to yourself, because it's feeding into part of who you are. So like you said, the games were really for you and you're letting everybody else play with you, which I think is very generous. So at this point, our time has flown. If you, I feel like we could talk for another few hours, but at the moment, how can listeners get in touch with you, and what is one little tiny thing you could have them do that could help spark some curiosity in their day?
Well, you can find Grandpa on LinkedIn, on Instagram at Grandpa STORK, on YouTube at Grandpa STORK, on TikTok I think I'm on Grandpa STORK, some on Facebook and Twitter. So you can find, if you do a search for Grandpa STORK and Dragon's Egg, like the first 3 pages. But I would say, okay. So like the game. So play a game with me. One of the games that we've been playing around the world. The first game is called the Real Names Game. REAL is an acronym for reciprocal expressions, acronyms, algorithms, and linguistics. It's really it's one of the games that's meant to be a acronymic large language model, but we've been using it as a game to help bolster creativity and the idea of how do we define ourselves. So take the letters of your name, turn it into an acronym. Now begin to tell your story, either in a list of qualities or a descriptive sentence to paint that picture. And so it's like Janice did. And so we invite you all to play the Real Names Game. Give your name as a gift of literacy. Share it with the folks. But one of the things, so this is meant to be an application. We want to connect people through language, and that you define who you are. Use this acronymic game and start diving into the rabbit hole of your identity. So not just the words that you use to define yourself, turn those into an acronym. Now define those words. What do they mean to you? And so that's the process we're going to. We're building this application as a way to hopefully get everybody's definition of what it means to be compassionate, and all these words that we define ourselves and create our own kind of language model that we can really search and see what are the real stories of humanity.
And we're done. I'm not even sure we're still on. I will say thank you very much. This was wonderful. My heart is
Thank
full.
you, Janice. I love it.
And I love you too. And if you're interested in the Octopus Movement, reach out to Grandpa Stork or me or anybody else. And you can go to the octopusmovement.org or find us on all the social medias. And just remember that we all begin life out of the box. Embrace your inner octopus, join the movement, and let's bloom a sustainable, curious future together. I'm Janice Campbell, and I'll see you next time.
I'm Anthony. Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.